Dust whipped fiercely across the Nebraska plains as the stagecoach rattled into the small frontier town of Willow Bend. Under a searing sky, Lucinda Pierce, known by the whisper of scornful tongues as too old for a mail-order bride, stepped off the coach with heavy, determined steps. The barren landscape, stretching out in hues of ochre and rust, bore silent witness to her arrival. With a tattered shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders and a heart full of defiance, she clutched a small satchel holding all she had left. Amid murmurs and sidelong glances from townsfolk gathered at the dusty depot, Lucinda resolved in that charged moment that her future would be hers alone to shape. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. Lucinda's journey had been long and lonesome. Cast out after a life's worth of scandal and with a past that had branded her an outcast, she carried with her not only the weight of whispered accusations, but also the delicate hope embodied by her precious daughter, Marianne, now bundled in her arms. The stagecoach, creaking under the blistering heat, had been her only companion as she left behind the vestiges of a town that had never understood her sacrifices. Now, arriving at Willow Bend, she questioned everything. Would this meager town offer the refuge she desperately needed, or would its inhabitants only see her as an inconvenient relic of a life she wished to forget? The rustic facade of the McKenna Ranch loomed ahead, a modest collection of weathered wooden planks, a sagging sod roof, and a tired front porch that spoke of years of isolation and hardship. It was here that Lucinda was to meet her new husband, a young widower named Jonathan Crane, whose eyes still mourned a wife lost too soon. Rumor had it he was scarcely 28, yet fate had plucked him from a world of joy and thrust him into a harsh duty as a father to two spirited children, Tommy and Lila, aged 7 and 5 respectively. Despite the gossip that labeled her too old for his tender age, Jonathan had seen in Lucinda a semblance of strength and wisdom that no one else possessed, and it was this belief that had drawn him to propose a union founded on mutual need rather than convention. Lucinda was led through a creaking wooden door by a silent, somber-faced servant. Inside, the parlor was lit modestly by a single kerosene lamp. The smell of curing hides and old tobacco intermingled with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread. A carved wooden token, fashioned in the likeness of a soaring eagle clutching a sprig of sage, hung prominently above the mantel, a subtle symbol of hope and protection from the rigors of frontier life. Though she barely dared to glance upon it first, Lucinda's eyes eventually lingered, drawing comfort from its silent promise that, despite everything, life could still offer renewal. As Lucinda stepped further into quiet space, she heard a voice, a low, hesitant greeting that broke the silence like a tentative chord. "Miss Pierce." It came from Jonathan Crane, whose presence filled the small room with a reserved vulnerability. His dark eyes, still rimmed with grief, held concern and quiet determination. Jonathan's few words were measured, as if he feared that too much speech might break the fragile trust being built. "I welcome you," he managed, nodding slightly in greeting. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of years lost and hopes hard-earned on the unforgiving prairie. Outside the cabin, the rough-and-tumble whispers of Willow Bend's residents drifted on the warm breeze. A nearby general store sign creaked in the wind, while a weathered post near the entrance bore an inscription in faded paint. "All are welcome, but few are understood." Lucinda found herself wondering if this town, with its stark honesty and rugged faces, might eventually offer not only shelter, but a chance at quiet redemption. Yet as she looked into Jonathan's vacant yet kind eyes, she sensed that his own past was threaded with secret burdens of loss and regret, a silence that echoed her own. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the wide Nebraska sky, Lucinda sat on a creaking porch step, Marianne asleep in her arms, and listened to the murmur of voices from passing townsfolk. Their hushed gossip spoke of a mail-order bride called too old and a young widower who, in his sorrow, might be forced to settle for less than heart's desire. But Lucinda's response to their murmurs was etched on her face, a quiet defiance, a vow silently made as she wrapped her shawl tightly around them both. every rigid contour of the frontier. Every gust of wind that stirred the dust beneath her feet became a testament to the strength it took to venture forth when all the world had turned its back. In the solitude of that twilight hour, Jonathan Crane joined her on the porch. The space between them was filled only with the sound of the wind, the distant call of a lonesome night bird, and the gentle creak of wooden boards that had weathered many winters. Jonathan offered no grand speeches. Instead, he shifted his weight, his eyes meeting hers with an understanding that needed no words. He carried with him the quiet resilience of youth tempered by loss, and his strong, silent dignity reassured Lucinda that together they might build something better than what the past had offered. As the cooling air embraced them and the lamplight flickered like a fading promise, a soft knock at the door startled them. The knock was measured, yet it resonated with underlying urgency, a reminder that the outside world, with all its judgment and misunderstanding, had not forgotten them either. Lucinda's heart fluttered. What could this unanticipated visitor bring? The stage was set amidst the orange glow of dusk and the settling dust of the plains. The invitation to face whatever came next came not just from a knock at the door, but from the very promise of new beginning. A promise that would require every ounce of her defiance and every shred of the hope that she carried for herself and for little Mary Ann. She rose slowly, drawing herself together as if steeling her very soul, and stepped toward the door. Each of her steps was measured, resolute, a silent vow that she would meet the judgment of the past head-on. Jonathan, his eyes filled with both wariness and support, followed close behind. Outside, the wind sighed across the sod, carried with the faded whispers of what once was and the shimmering possibility of what might be. And as the door swung open to reveal a face cloaked in the twilight, one that promised both confrontation and potential for healing, Lucinda squared her shoulders. In that charged moment, with the twilight a quiet witness to her courage, she embraced the unknown with a heart that dared to hope. The mysterious knock at the door left Lucinda Pierce standing in a moment frozen between duty and dread. The fading light of the late afternoon slanted through the dusty windows of McKenna Ranch, and for a heartbeat, her pulse thundered in quiet defiance. Clutching her shawl tighter around her shoulders and holding Mary Ann protectively, she hesitated on the worn wooden steps. Outside, the gentle Nebraska wind whispered of secrets long buried in the dusty plains, carrying hints of sage and distant folklore. Behind her, distant murmurs of gossip and scorn reached her ears from the small town of Willow Bend. But here, on the threshold of her new life, she would dare to dream of redemption. Slowly, she stepped forward and eased the splintered door open a crack. In the dim glow cast by a kerosene lamp on the central hall, the sound of a raspy voice emerged from the shadows, a voice that belonged not to a hostile stranger, but to a judgmental townsfolk. "Miss Pierce, I reckon you're expected," the voice drawled, its tone laced with both pity and concern. A thin figure in a threadbare coat stood just beyond the doorway, his eyes darting to the delicate carved wooden token hanging overhead, a token depicting an eagle clenching a sprig of sage. Its symbolism of protection and hope amid desolation was not lost on Lucinda, though she knew it would only complicate the judgments already cast upon her. For a moment, the figure lingered with silent scrutiny before stepping aside to let her in. Once inside, as the door creaked shut behind her, Lucinda sank onto a low wooden bench near the hearth. She drew her shawl closer, a well-worn shield against the cold and the biting memories of her past, and closed her eyes briefly. The warmth of the small fire mingled with the heavy scent of curing hides and dried sage that permeated the parlor, momentarily softening the harshness of her exile. Jonathan Crane, the young widower whose quiet grief and guarded kindness had greeted her on arrival, entered the room. His eyes were rimmed with the sorrow of days gone by. Yet when he saw Lucinda, they held something gentler. A spark of understanding gleaned from shared isolation. "Good evening, Lucinda," he said in a low, measured tone, his voice tentative as if testing the fragile connection between them. Without a flourish, his glance fell to Mary Ann, who was nestled in a corner swayed in a faded quilt that had once belonged to his late wife. Even the children, Tommy, bold yet inquisitive, and Lila, shy with quiet accord, watched from a doorway with cautious interest. The parlor, modest yet dignified, became a temporary sanctuary where the burdens of scandal and loss were held at bay. Lucinda moved to serve supper. A simple stew simmered slowly over an open hearth, and as she stirred the pot, the aroma of slow-cooked meat and fresh herbs intertwined with a whisper of desert winds. With each measured stir, memories of harsh words and accusing stares further galvanized her resolve to build a future founded on quiet strength rather than the prejudices of the past. Meanwhile, Jonathan helped set the table with chipped porcelain cups and a livery of wooden bowls. Their gestures were sparse but filled with a careful, unspoken intimacy forged by mutual grief and the desire to heal. In those quiet moments over dinner, the clinks of cutlery and the soft murmur of shared silence created a space where both could express vulnerabilities without words. Jonathan's eyes occasionally met Lucinda's with tenderness that hinted at a longing to close the chasm of years lost to sorrow, while Lucinda's steady gaze conveyed an unyielding determination to forge ahead, despite the weight of the town's scorn. As evening deepened into night, the earlier visitor's voice faded into memory, replaced by the lowing of the wind and the distant creak of wooden boards in the aging structure. Yet the echo of that initial knock remained in Lucinda's mind, entwined with the cryptic note that had first confronted her, a note bearing the chilling promise. "Your past is not forgotten. The tide is coming," signed with an ominous M. That message, scrawled in fading ink upon a tattered piece of paper, stirred a cocktail of anxiety and fierce defiance. It was a reminder that the ghosts of her past still haunted the fringes of this new existence. In the following days, life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Lucinda immersed herself in the daily tasks of frontier living, mending fences, tending to small gardens, and, in tender moments, instructing young Tommy and Lila in the ways of the land. Each chore was an affirmation of her growing commitment to her new home and her determination to prove that, despite gossip and disgrace, she could be a force for nurturing and strength. During one such afternoon, as Lucinda worked in the yard beneath a vast, unyielding sky, a gust of wind swept through the property. It carried with it a folded scrap of paper that danced onto her path. Her breath caught as she recognized the handwriting, a continuation of the harsh reminder from before. This note, slightly more outstretched in thought, read, "Do not fear the tide. Learn to swim or be swept away. M." The short message, whispered against the rustle of cornfields and the scent of blooming sagebrush, stoked the flames of her resolve even further. She clutched it to her heart, vowing silently that she would not be defined by that past, no matter how dark its specters appeared. Even as Lucinda embraced her new life, town gossip, like a persistent drumbeat, echoed through Willow Bend. At the general store and the small church bell tower, murmurs spread about the mail-order bride who dared to claim her fate, and the young widower whose eyes held a sorrowful promise. While the rumors stung, they also hardened her resolve to forge something genuine, a family built on trust and defiance of outdated norms. Jonathan, overhearing such whispers during quiet moments at dinner, would sometimes sit his jaw and steer the conversation toward matters of the land and the future, refusing to let venomous gossip dictate their lives. One afternoon, as dusk arrived in a wash of lavender and deep blue, Jonathan and Lucinda found themselves working side by side in the barn, repairing a sagging roof beam. As they worked in companionable silence, the creaking of the old wood and the soft clatter of tools provided a steady, rhythmic backdrop to their renewed bond. Jonathan paused, leaning on a ladder, his eyes distant with memories of his late wife, a quiet grief that he now allowed to coexist with a growing acceptance of Lucinda's strength. "I lost much when she died," he murmured, voice low, "but there's room in this rugged world for new hope if we dare to take it." His words, gentle and halting, resonated with Lucinda, who felt her own scars slowly mending beneath the weight of shared resolve. That evening, as twilight softened the hard edges of the day, a knock resounded once more at the cabin's door. This time the sound was sharp and insistent, a sound that carried the weight of impending judgment. Lucinda's heart pounded as she and Jonathan exchanged a brief, knowing glance. Outside, she could glimpse a figure framed in the sepia light. A neighbor or messenger, perhaps, bearing news that might tip the balance between acceptance and further condemnation. The daughter, Mary Ann, stirred in her crib at the soft pounding, her small coos a gentle reassurance amid the storm of uncertainty. Jonathan opened the door cautiously. A gaunt, middle-aged man with a stern face and wary eyes stood there, clutching an envelope sealed with a simple crest. Without preamble, he spoke in a hushed, clipped tone. "Miss Pierce, I'm sorry to disturb you, but the town's council has received a claim against your residency. They say your past has no place here." His words, laced with the bitterness of stale judgment, fell like ice on Lucinda's already guarded heart. Lucinda took the envelope with trembling fingers, her mind swirling with the latest reminder of the prejudice that haunted her every step. As she broke the seal and scanned the document, her face tightened with both anger and resignation. The claim alleged that, because of her scandal, she was ineligible to inherit any rights to the land, a legal maneuver designed to ostracize her further. Yet even as the bitterness of the accusation stung, a determined fire rose in her chest, a silent vow that she would fight for belonging, not only for herself but for Mary Ann, for Tommy, and for Lila, whose tender smiles had begun to fill the empty spaces of McKenna Ranch. That night, as the wind sighed around the eaves and the stars blinked uncertainly above, Lucinda sat near a flickering lamp, the envelope now carefully folded alongside the familiar silver pendant and the carved token. Running Hawk entered silently, his stance protective yet gentle. In the hushed privacy of that cramped room, he reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. No words were needed as his steady gaze and soft nod conveyed that they would battle these tides, both the external scorn and the internal guilt, together. As she looked out the window, now revealing a lonely figure walking the dusty road toward Willow Bend, Lucinda felt her determination entwined with a quiet hope. The knock at the door, the scornful letter from the town, and the remnants of her past all served as fuel for her resolve to carve a future where love and family could flourish in the face of judgment. With a final, slow exhale that mingled grief and unwavering courage, Lucinda vowed silently that she would face every trial with honor. In that charged moment, the soft pains of the past were replaced by the promise of tomorrow, a tomorrow where she would not be defined by exile, but by the strength she nurtured each day. The stage was now set, and beneath the vast Nebraska sky, the first flash of dawn signaled both the potential for renewal and the stirring of new conflicts. The tale of the mail-order bride who was called Too Old had truly just begun. The legal claim weighed heavily on Lucinda Pierce's heart as dusk settled over Willow Bend, its amber light revealing the rugged outlines of McKenna Ranch under a vast Nebraska sky. The envelope, still clutched tightly in her trembling hand from the earlier delivery, was a tangible reminder of society unwilling to let go of its judgment. Its words, written in spidery ink and bearing a crest that spoke of local authority, asserted that her residency, her very right to belong in this frontier town, was under dispute because of her scandalous past. Inside the modest parlor, the scent of slow-cooked stew blended with the aroma of dried sage and wood smoke from the flickering kerosene lamp. Lucinda sat at a rough-hewn table, Mary Ann's soft breasts mingling with the quiet creaks of the old building, while Jonathan Crane, the young widower with kind eyes rimmed by grief, stood near with a silent, pensive expression. The atmosphere in the room was charged with sorrow and determination alike, as if every murmur of the wind outside echoed the tensions rising within. Jonathan cleared his throat softly. "We must face this claim, Lucinda," he said with restrained authority. His words, though few, carried the weight of a man who had experienced tremendous loss and now wished for nothing more than protect the fragile hope budding around him. Lucinda nodded, her eyes clouded by memories of past scorn yet burning with resolute defiance. "I will not be defined by the harsh judgments of a narrow-minded town," she vowed quietly, her voice trembling yet firm. "I only want a chance to build a home for Mary Ann, for you, for Tommy, and for Lila." Outside, the wind whispered of change and carried the distant clatter of hooves, an ever-present reminder that the frontier was a place where nature and prejudice alike could strike unexpectedly. The legal claim was just one manifestation of the town's hardened attitudes toward her. In the dusty streets of Willow Bend, gossip spread like wildfire, and no one was immune to a consuming flame. Yet, amid all that blame and sorrow, something tender had begun to bloom between Lucinda and Jonathan, a quiet partnership forged through shared pain and the mutual promise of a new beginning. Later that evening, as the sky deepened to twilight and the first chill of night crept into the wooden walls of the ranch, Lucinda found herself in the company of Tommy and Lila, the two children whose shy glances and cautious smiles had gradually softened in her presence, gathered around her in the cluttered kitchen where she had been teaching them to knead dough and mix the ingredients for bread. The rhythmic kneading and soft patter of little hands provided a momentary sanctuary from a looming threat of legal persecution and town reproach. "Mama," Tommy said at last, eyes wide with confusion and hope, "if we learn to make our own bread, maybe we can share it with everyone so they'll see how good we are." His bold statement, innocent and sincere, resonated within Lucinda's heart. For a moment, she allowed herself the luxury of a smile, imagining a future where shared kindness could defy bitter rumors. Lila, more timid, clutched a small doll in her arms and nodded in agreement. Even Mary Ann, nestled in a corner wrapped in a faded quilt, cooed softly as if affirming this fragile promise. That quiet domesticity was shattered by the arrival of a stern knock on the door. The sound, clear and unyielding, jolted Lucinda and Jonathan from their moment of calm. Jonathan's eyes darkened with quiet resolve as he stepped forward to answer the door. A gaunt, middle-aged man, his face etched with years of frontier life and prejudice, stood on the threshold. He carried himself with a deliberate stiffness that betrayed his purpose. He was a council messenger, dispatched by the local board that governed Willow Bend with an iron-fisted tradition. "Miss Pierce," the man began in a clipped tone, "there are those in town who believe your presence here is a stain upon Willow Bend. They demand that the claim be enforced immediately, lest further legal action be taken." His voice wavered on the edge of hostility and pity, and his eyes flickered briefly to the carved token hanging on the wall, a symbol the townspeople saw as a relic of false hope. The messenger's words, harsh in their bureaucratic finality, sent a cold shudder through Lucinda. Clutching the envelope tighter, she felt the sting of societal rejection like a fresh wound. Jonathan put a steady hand on her arm, his silent support an anchor amid the rising storm of judgment. "We will face this," he whispered, his tone low and unwavering. "We must show them that our home is built on strength and honor, not on the scars of a troubled past." Later that night, as the wind howled outside and the ranch was bathed in the flickering glow of oil lamps, Lucinda sat alone on the porch, the envelope now resting on her lap, like a forbidden relic. The sound of her children playing softly inside mingled with the quiet murmur of distant voices from the town, a constant reminder of the relentless scrutiny of Willow Bend. In the solitude, she fingered a small, intricately wrought locket that had been left with her upon arrival as a parting gift from someone whose identity had been lost to time. The locket, with its delicate engraving of a single wheat stalk entwined with sprig of sage, symbolized resilience and the promise of harvest even in barren soil. Her mind wandered through the memories of her past, a past where false accusations and whispered condemnations had defined her existence. The locket reminded her that even in the face of overwhelming odds, fragments of beauty and strength could be found. "I shall not be swallowed by the tide," she murmured softly, voice merging with the wind. "I will reclaim what is mine, my dignity, my home, and a future for my children." Inside the cabin, Jonathan sat by the hearth, his face illuminated by the warm, flickering light. He recalled quiet moments spent in sorrowful solitude since his wife's passing, moments that carved deep yearnings into his soul. Yet the growing presence of Lucinda, with her fierce spirit and unswerving resolve, had awakened in him a longing not only for companionship, but for the promise of redemption. As he gazed at the carved token, which now seemed to glow with life of its own in the firelight, he understood that their union was not just a patch to cover old wounds, but a testament to the power of hope in a world too often defined by judgment. Even as the legal threat loomed, a new murmur of discontent emerged from beyond the ranch. A rumor, born on the lips of the neighbor at the general store, mentioned that not all in Willow Bend were united in scorn. Some quietly believed that the claim against Lucinda was a pretext for a larger scheme, a land dispute designed to seize the thriving McKenna ranch for itself. This revelation, subtle yet potent, deepened the conflict. It was not only personal shame at stake, but the very future of the home they had begun to build. As the night deepened into a cold, bleak vigil, Jonathan rose and joined Lucinda on the porch. The two of them exchanged long, sorrowful glances that spoke of their secret hopes and the quiet mourning of past losses. "They want to strip us of what little we have," Jonathan said, his voice heavy with determination, "but we will not yield. Our strength is in our unity, in every hand that tends to the land and every heart that refuses to submit to despair." His words, simple and unwavering, resonated with Lucinda, bolstering her resolve. A sudden stir by the back door, perhaps the sound of approaching footsteps or the rustle of fabric in the wind, pulled their attention outward. The soft sound was almost swallowed by the distant howling of the cold, but its brevity was enough to make hearts quicken. Lucinda clutched the locket and the note tightly, as if drawing courage from their symbolic weight. "We must prepare for what comes," she murmured, a vow spoken into the night, "and show them that our future is built on the truth of our love, not the falsehoods they spew." Inside, Tommy and Lila huddled near the warmth of the kitchen, their playful chatter subdued by the tension outside. Their presence reminded Lucinda daily of the fragile hope that had brought her to this forsaken yet promising place. Meanwhile, Marian slept quietly in a corner, a silent beacon of the life she had fought so hard to begin anew. As the midnight hour approached, the murmur of voices from outside grew louder. Uncertain steps, low whispers, and the unmistakable creak of a door opening resonated across the ranch. In that fraught moment, with the promise of a new day yet obscured by looming threats, Lucinda and Jonathan exchanged one last, lingering look, a silent command to be brave. With hands clasped and hearts steeled by the trials of the past, they resolved to face whatever judgment, legal or otherwise, would come with the dawn. In the cold pulse of the frontier night, amid the scent of sage, the slow creak of settling wood, and the faint hope of new beginnings, the future of Willow Bend and of a family born from scorn yet united by love hung in balance. As the sconces flicker on the weathered walls of McKenna Ranch, a final gust of wind blew through, whispering of impending change and the unyielding promise that even in the harshest of storms, hope and redemption could be found. At the break of shivering dawn, the hushed traffic of approaching footsteps and murmured voices grew unmistakable. Outside, the once quiet plains of Willow Bend now trembled with tension. In the McKenna Ranch's modest parlor, Lucinda Pierce gripped the silver pendant, its intricate design echoing the carved token above the door, as she exchanged a laden look with Jonathan Crane. The legal claim against her residency had been more than a bureaucratic slight. It was a symbolic charge to strip away the fragile foundation of her new life. And now, as the wind whispered over sod walls and rustled dry sage in the fields, that threat was coming closer. Jonathan's face, etched with quiet grief and resolve, darkened as he stepped toward the window. "They're here," he murmured, barely above a whisper, his eyes narrowing at the sight of shadowed figures emerging along the dusty trail. The soft clatter of hooves on hardened earth and the faint murmur of disembodied whispers filled the air, an ominous arrival of the town's enforcers, intent on restoring old judgments. Lucinda's heart pounded as she felt the weight of every whispered rumor, every judgmental stare from the town that had once cast her aside. Yet, as she tightened her shawl around her shoulders, she also recalled the quiet lessons learned from watching her children and from the steadfast support Jonathan had shown her. Today, this confrontation would either break them or forge them anew, and she resolved then, silently, that her future would not be defined by the cruelty of the past. Before the meeting with the council, the door swung open to reveal a gaunt council member, Mr. Silas Hinton, a man whose thin frame and angular features bore the hard lines of frontier politics. His eyes, cold and calculating, flicked over Lucinda and then over Jonathan. "Miss Pierce," he began in a clipped tone, as if reciting a legal formality. "It has come to our attention that your presence here undermines the honor of Willow Bend. The claim is clear. You have no right to reside on these lands." His voice, devoid of empathy, fell sharply in the quiet room. Jonathan's jaw clenched. "With all due respect, Mr. Hinton, my home is no plaything for idle hearsay," he replied firmly. His tone, though measured, carried a sound of personal loss and stubborn hope. In his eyes, Lucinda saw the trace of lingering grief for his late wife, a grief that had hardened him against the prejudice of the world, yet softened him in his willingness to defy the town's harsh judgments. As Mr. Hinton continued his recitation of local statutes and historical records designed to discredit Lucinda's right to remain, the tension in the room mounted. Lucinda's thoughts swirled with memories of whispered accusations, of nights spent in the cold exile of scorn. But now, bolstered by Jonathan's quiet strength and the gentle resistance of Tommy and Lila appearing from the doorway, she felt that this charge would not douse the newfound embers of hope. "I have lived a life marred by misunderstanding and falsehood," Lucinda said softly, her voice trembling with both vulnerability and defiance. "But this home, this family, has rekindled in me a will to endure. I will not be cast out again." Her declaration, though quiet, resonated in the narrow space of the parlor like a determined rallying cry. Mr. Hinton's eyes narrowed further, and his tone grew harsher. "You speak of belonging, yet the records show otherwise. It is not merely sentiment we enforce here, but the law. I am bound by duty." His gaze flickered toward Jonathan, as if expecting the young widower to cower beneath official pressure. Jonathan, however, stepped forward, his posture straight as he placed himself between Hinton and Lucinda. "I will not allow this council to strip away our rights," he said, his voice low, resolute, and laced with defiant fire born of personal loss. "This ranch, these lands, have sheltered us through hardship. It is a place that must be preserved for the honest and the brave." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the rhythmic creaking of the ranch's old wooden beams and the distant rustle of wind among the mesquite. Outside, the gray skies slowly lifted as if in reluctant promise of daybreak. The council member's eyes, however, betrayed some inner conflict even as he spoke. "There are voices in town, Miss Pierce, that claim your past is stained beyond redemption. They say you are unworthy of respect, and the claim against your residency is supported not solely by legal technicalities, but by the moral standards we hold dear." His words were cold, a litany of prejudice wielded as a weapon. At that moment, a faint sound from the back of the homestead drew every eye. From beyond the kitchen door came a soft, almost imperceptible whimper, a child's distress. Tommy, bold yet tender, had slipped outside to check on Lila, the quieter one, but he realized she had wandered near the unstable, crumbling part of the barn. In the commotion, Lila had cried out, her tiny voice echoing sorrowfully among the rafters, and now her anxious cry reached them all like an alarm bell. Instantly, Jonathan's face transformed from defiant calm to fierce urgency. He excused himself in a soft murmur to Mr. Hinton and rushed outside. Lucinda barely had time to follow before he returned carrying Lila in his strong arms. Her tear-streaked face the physical mark of vulnerability that hit him hard. The council members' features darkened at the sight, a reminder that the threat against them was not merely legal, but profoundly human. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion as he cradled Lila close. "It is my duty, too, to protect these children." In that admission, a silent truth passed between him and Lucinda, a testament to the fact that their bond was founded on shared suffering and the unyielding belief that family, no matter how chosen, was sacred. The tension in the room grew palpable as Mr. Hinton, now visibly disturbed by the unexpected crisis, adjusted his stance. "This incident may be seen as evidence of instability," he argued uncomfortably, "a condition that only those unfit to reside among us would endure." His word, however, fell on ears steeled by hardship and bolstered by collective defiance. Lucinda stood, her eyes flashing with a mix of sorrow and determination. "I have endured more than you can imagine," she said softly, her voice laced with raw vulnerability. "My past has been marred by false accusations and cruelty, yet I stand here today, unbowed. These children, Marianne, Tommy, and Lila, are the heart of our future. They deserve a home forged by love, not tarnished by prejudice." Her words, delicate yet triumphant, seemed to reverberate against both the wooden token above the door and the stillness of the ranch. For long, silence reigned as Mr. Hinton considered her words. Outside, the wind picked up once more, rustling the sagebrush and carrying the scent of damp earth. Finally, his voice emerged, quieter and more conflicted than before. Perhaps there is merit in reconsidering," he murmured, though his tone betrayed that his mind remained ensnared in the chains of tradition. He secured the envelope containing the legal claim and began to retreat, leaving a lingering note of hesitation that promised further contention. As Mr. Hinton departed, Jonathan and Lucinda remained on the porch, their faces illuminated by the rising sun's amber glow. The legal claim had not been annulled, but its immediate threat had momentarily waned. In the aftermath, Jonathan took Lucinda's hands in his, their touch charged with a blended sorrow and hope. "We will fight for our right to be together," he vowed softly, the promise echoing as if it were a sacred duty. "I cannot bear to see you cast away any longer. We will show them that our love and our home are built on truth, not on the lies of the ignorant." Lucinda, nodded, the weight of years lifting with the sunrise. "Though the tide may be relentless," she whispered, "we shall learn to navigate its currents. Our family is our strength, and our future is ours to forge." As she spoke, the silver pendant hung at her throat, and the carved token above watched over them like silent guardians, reminders of resilience amid hardship. In that tender, resolute morning light, the promise of renewal wove an unspoken pact between them. Yet, even as their immediate crisis subsided, a new detail emerged. A scrap of paper, half buried in the dust beside the old wooden post at the edge of the porch. Jonathan picked it up and, with careful fingers, unfolded to reveal another message from Em. "The debt is not yet settled." The note's dark message sent a shiver down Lucinda's spine. It was a final declaration, a faint yet potent clue that many battles remained ahead. Jonathan's eyes, however, shone with a determined light. "We must be ready," he said, his voice low and resolute. "For as long as they seek to tear us apart, we stand together." Their embrace, filled with the promise of sacrifice and unyielding support, sealed that moment. As the sun climbed higher over the Nebraska plains, casting long shadows across the sod walls of McKenna Ranch, Lucinda and Jonathan vowed silently to protect their cherished family and their emerging future. Though the persistent echoes of judgment still whispered in the wind, the burgeoning love between them shone like a beacon, a tender defiance in a world that had long refused compassion. At daybreak, the cold Nebraska air carried a hushed promise of change as the courthouse bells of Willow Bend tolled in the distance. The legal claim that had so threatened Lucinda Pierce's right to remain at the McKenna Ranch had come to a head. In the town's modest meeting hall, a building of battered tin siding and faded murals of a bygone era, a tense assembly of townsfolk, council members, and local magistrates gathered. At the center of the dispute stood Lucinda, her face set with quiet dignity, and Jonathan Crane, the young widower whose steady resolve lent her strength. Their children, Tommy, bold and alert, and Lila, shy yet curious, sat beside him, while Marianne remained cradled in Lucinda's arms. The hall itself smelled of old wood and kerosene, and every creak of its floorboards resonated like a solemn heartbeat against the harsh judgments that had been levied against Lucinda. Before the assembled council, the matter at hand was not merely about legal technicalities. It was a clash between frontier prejudice and the raw, resilient pulse of human hope. Mr. Silas Hinton, the council member whose earlier words had chilled their spirits, rose at length to speak. "Miss Pierce," he began in a clipped tone that trembled with both authority and ingrained scorn, "the claim before us asserts that your presence here taints the honor of Willow Bend. The records, though marred by gossip, point to actions which, by our standards, render you unfit for land ownership. His eyes swept the room, catching fleeting glances of hardened faces and murmurs of disapproval. But as Lucinda lifted her chin, a humble defiance shone in her eyes. "I have come to build a home," she said quietly, her voice measured but resolute, "not to tarnish it. My past, replete with false accusations and bitter loneliness, is mine to bear. I seek not pity, but justice and a chance to prove that this family, my dear Marianne, as well as Tommy and Lila, is built not on scandal but on the unyielding strength of our hearts." A murmur rippled through the hall, a mix of curiosity and reluctant admiration filtering to the gathered crowd. Jonathan Crane, standing beside her with quiet authority, stepped forward. "This land," he said, voice imbued with both grief and hope, "has been our refuge in times of trial. We have weathered drought, loss, and the cruelty of rumor. To strip us of the right to call a home is to dishonor the very spirit of our frontier." His gaze, steady and deep, fell upon Mr. Hinton, whose rigid posture betrayed a tremor of uncertainty. As the council deliberated, new evidence was presented. A telegram from a neighboring region arrived, a letter clearly stamped with the crest of a powerful local land baron. The telegram revealed that the legal claim against Lucinda was not solely based on her past misdeeds, but was also entangled with a broader, more insidious land dispute. The land baron, it turned out, had been scheming to seize valuable acreage near Willow Bend, using moral indignation as his weapon. The council's own records, long buried and conveniently overlooked, now surfaced to expose the true motives behind the claim. Within the meeting hall, the atmosphere tensed, the strain of deception and greed laid bare before all. A council member with a compassionate twinkle in his eye spoke up. "It seems the debate is not just of individual guilt, but a collective injustice. Let us not allow prejudice to be the shackle that binds us to outdated custom." The words, soft as they were firm, began to sway the murmuring masses. Outside, as the meeting drew toward climax, Jonathan and Lucinda found a quiet moment on the creaking porch of the ranch, away from the heated debates of the courthouse. The early morning light cast long shadows across the sod walls and dusty trails, and the scent of sage drifted lazily on the breeze. Jonathan took Lucinda's hand in his, the simple gesture speaking volumes, about a promise renewed, about the battles fought and those yet to come. "We will not let them erase what we have built," he whispered. "Our family is our sanctuary, and I will risk everything to protect it." His eyes, reflecting both grief and fierce devotion, locked with hers, conveying a certainty that transcended words. Lucinda felt her heart swell with a defiant hope. "Then let them see that our love and our unity can withstand even the sharpest judgment," she replied, her voice low but determined. She reached over and retrieved from her shawl a small weathered locket, a family heirloom from a time when she had known tenderness and was cherished, a token of her resilience that now symbolized her rebirth. With trembling care, she fastened it around her neck, its soft clink punctuating her vow to rise above the injustice that sought to condemn her. The day's proceedings in Willow Bend ended ambiguously. The council, now divided by the new evidence of a broader land dispute, deferred a final decision on a legal claim for further review. The murmurs in the hall shifted from condemnation to cautious sympathy. As the assembly dispersed, many cast sidelong glances at Lucinda and Jonathan, but not all were hostile. In that murmur of the departing crowd, a few voices offered quiet words of encouragement, acknowledging the couple's quiet bravery. Later at the McKenna Ranch, in the gentle amber glow of the rising sun, the quiet of the land echoed the promise of renewal. Jonathan, stroking a weathered lock of his late wife's hair that he kept hidden in a small wooden box, confessed in a soft, haunted tone, "I lost the love of my life long ago, but in you I have found the chance to heal." His admission, mingled with a tender vulnerability, marked a moment of reckoning, where past grief met the fervor of new beginnings. In a small, impromptu ceremony held on the ranch's creaking porch beneath the relentless Nebraska sky, Lucinda and Jonathan exchanged simple vows. With Tommy and Lila standing by as surrogates of youthful courage and Marianne cradled in Lucinda's arms, they declared more than just marriage. They proclaimed their commitment to build a life together, defying both the bitter judgment of the past and the uncertain prospect of the frontier. No elaborate trappings were needed, only the raw, honest promise of shared hardship and healing, spoken in voices that trembled with emotion as much as they shone with hope. The crowd that gathered, mostly curious townsfolk whose hearts were slowly thawed by the sight of genuine unity, watched in stunned silence as the couple joined their lives. Mr. Hinton, whose earlier severity had softened under the weight of undeniable evidence of injustice, offered a curt nod of reluctant approval. In that humble yet moving moment, the legal claim was put on hold, its icy sting replaced by quiet celebration and the promise of a future nurtured by a chosen family. Years later, the McKenna Ranch stood as a beacon of resilience. Lucinda, now radiant with the strength of someone who had overcome the harshest judgments, taught her children and later her grandchildren the art of survival on the Nebraska plains. Jonathan, his grief having transformed into a deep, abiding tenderness, continued to protect and guide their family with the unwavering loyalty of a man reborn. And through it all, the carved wooden token, the silver pendant, the indigo scarf, and the locket remained as silent relics of time when love dared to defy the world. In the golden light of a late summer afternoon, as the wind whispered secrets through the tall prairie grass and the old porch creaked softly under the weight of years and memories, Lucinda and Jonathan exchanged a final, understanding glance. Their eyes carried the promise of many tomorrows, a quiet triumph over the tyranny of judgment and the endless, defiant song of hope born on the wild frontier.